Okay, so I'm watching this South Korean series called. It's a very strange name they have. I'm not entirely sure. Well, I mean, yeah, I can sort of guess, but it's a very strange name, shall we say? It's a very long name as well. Although I suppose in this sense it's better than to have a short name and it being easily mistaken for something else, etc. So it's called Bachelor's Vegetable Store, and as it begins, it's not quite a vegetable store. It begins very. That's the strange thing. I mean, you cannot say it begins slowly at all. It really goes at it. The first couple of episodes, wow, that's some high melodrama, like incredible amount of melodrama I've ever seen any. Yeah, but uh, it begins still from a very. I mean, it's not something like there are already some established so-called chebol that series deals with, which is an organization like Samsung and such in real life. Um, I think they're fictional. I mean, the ones that they deal with, yeah, they're all fictional, but it's not like we begin by having a so-called chebol. It begins with a teenager picking vegetables, and that's pretty much it. Um, so it's supposed to be based on a real life story of someone who succeeded in selling loads of vegetables. Apparently, that's pretty much it. So I still don't know. I mean, how much of it is really real? Yeah, considering it's very dramatic, very melodramatic. For something that is about vegetables, it's incredibly melodramatic. You would think that someone who sells vegetables has a very quiet life, but nope, nope. From when he was a teenager, there we go. It continues on, without relenting. So apparently, this is something called Magjang, or if that's how it's pronounced, I'm not sure. And there aren't actually many here from this genre. There's only 20, just 20. Yeah, on this side at least. Um, Apparently it means melodrama in, I think anyway, in Korean. I think I've never seen it before. That's probably because there aren't many on this side at least. And yeah, I mean it's just melodrama mainly. It seems, and it does fulfill that premise. It seriously does. From most of the first couple of episodes, though. Then it sort of softens a bit later on, but it's still high melodrama. The mother that that doesn't want to see him, keeps on hating him despite not I mean, before knowing who he is and such. So the whole thing continues on. In a way, it's interesting. What's what's a bit weird is that they want to make the audience believe that even after 10 years, they cannot recognize each other. One more thing, especially if they're sorely missing each other. Both of them just didn't recognize each other. And it's a bit unbelievable. I mean, just it's only 10 years. It's not like half a century or something where people, really, really change physically. I mean, sure, uh, teenagers do change when they become fully formed adults, I suppose, but not that much. I think. I mean, obviously the actors did change, especially the female actor. She really doesn't very much look like the previous one, honestly. Especially her eyes, to be honest. The other one does look somewhat, but still not that much. I mean, he still has a similar sort of smile somehow. He's obviously not the same actor, but he has a similar sort of style. But small details obviously have changed and such, which normally do not as an adult. But I think after 10 years, I don't think most people would just not recognize someone at all. I think most would. So it's a bit of a, I don't know, far-fetched premise, but ultimately it still works. I mean, you could still feel how, um, when he told her that, he dates all the time. So he goes to that house, the church-like house, whatever it is, to wait for Junshim and such. Uh, it's heartfelt, It's full of pathos, just like she showed and such, and it's very funny. Then, I mean, so having this premise means that you can sort of analyze how people can how people do respond, and well, in the sense, if the acting is done well, I suppose. I mean, it's obviously not a real sort of experiment, that people are really participating in real life. So it's obviously acting, but um, yeah, just you can sort of still see though how people react in the sense that like in a scene before then, there was a thing where they were in a theater and her family, adopted family, and they were looking at. And this is obviously a spoiler about the first couple of episodes because it happens really early on and such. So but, they were looking at earlier photos of her child before her, and now the father thinks that she is really gone, right? But in reality, his real child, died. So in the first couple of episodes, so what's interesting anyway is that her mother obviously was crying, and sure enough, she tries to say that she's been overcome with her memories and such. Well, that is real, but in a way, you can sort of see also how in real life. I mean, alright, so some people might cry to nostalgia. I suppose it would be a nostalgia sort of thing if she was really her daughter there. But they don't normally cry that much to nostalgia, so that could only mean something else. So I don't know if she honestly convinced him. He seems a bit, I don't know, just, I mean, it's one thing to convince him that she really is his daughter, because he didn't see her for more than a decade, and actually he didn't see her since she was a baby. So that's even more convincing, actually, because babies do obviously, change a lot. But um, when it comes to her excessive crying, his wife's excessive crying, in a sense, I think he should have questioned it more because it's a bit strange, If, people don't normally cry that much for nostalgia anyway. Now the same thing, in the same vein, when they were in that house together, male and female, and she was crying because she was overcome when he told her that he was dating at all and such. Um, Now he interpreted that as her being upset, becoming upset. Now, sure enough, I suppose people can be upset and cry, but I don't know. Upset also means, I suppose, becoming angry. Many people wouldn't cry if they become angry. So I don't know. It just depends. Though I mean, it didn't seem to me to be a cry out of anger in the sense, and he seemed to accept it quite easily as well, which is a bit strange, I suppose. Because so in a way it sort of makes me realize that there's different intensities to how people cry. I mean, it's not like I went to watch this drama just to measure that, but somehow and ending up doing that. And this is besides obviously the whole thing about selling vegetables. And see, this is the thing. So I mean, all right, so the first couple of episodes, they were very, especially the second episode, there was barely any comedy in it at all. But then it did continue on to be somewhat comedic. It did, yes. But I mean, they still have these moments like when the thugs beat them up and such, which obviously aren't comedic. But was comedic though. There was still a comedic, I suppose, insert per se. is that that guy just appeared out of nowhere. I'm still not sure what he's called, and he barely says anything. He claims to have said something, but only away from the camera. So I don't know. It's a sort of comedic trope, but it sort of works, in this sense. So it's certainly more comedic than many other things, like because I mean, ultimately, I mean, I did at first think that this wasn't going to be very comedic due to the first couple of episodes mainly, but then it turned around. So in this sense, yeah, I don't mind. I mean, it still has a dramatic backbone. So and stories that involve certain characters barely have any comedy at all. Like with her adopted mother, there's no comedy there, but basically, there's and a lot of other instances as well where there's none. But when it comes to the vegetable selling, yeah, that's quite comedic. There, it can be quite comedic, in terms of just having what happens there and such, and um, ultimately, yeah, and then there was also obviously the third sort of genre, I suppose, of romance. I suppose it's only just slowly developing right now, even up to the I've just finished watching the 11th episode actually, and they've only just only now really started going out. So anyway, it's not that I care too much about just these sort of things, but I, I care more about plot mainly. That's really the most important thing in my opinion. Um, but it's developing, and in a way, it's sort of interesting because then you get this thing where they're sort of fulfilling a promise that they made in childhood, and he's doing it without even knowing supposedly. So that's sort of interesting. But then you get the thing with her mother as well, and what she'll possibly do in the future, and so far she's already tried to and succeed and get him out of the market. So it's uh, it's interesting, I suppose, yeah, entail. Now, what I don't like though, there are things I don't like, obviously, as always. There are always things that are not very likable. Is unfortunately that guy there just I don't know, the guy that tried to woo her at first until he basically gave up now since she already has someone else, but he only tried to woo her to get back his car. Now, it's not that specifically that I dislike. I mean, that had comedic potential, but didn't really fulfill it that much, in my opinion. But what I dislike is the fact he shouts all the time. Like, well, come on, really? It's honestly headache inducing. Just shouts. No matter what he does, he shouts. Only if he's really depressed, he's just depressed then. But as his own mother said, uh, he breaks her ears and he shouts whenever he's worried or something, and it's really irritating. I mean, the other people sometimes shout as well, but not to the same extent. This guy just shouts almost in most of the scenes he's in, and it's just so annoying. Um, and I mean, we get drama there as well. They're sort of going in opposite directions now. Whereas, this person who's supposed to be of higher status, the mock group is sort of on the up. Um, the others aren't. The Soul, I think they were called. They're going. They're doing badly now. So, which isn't actually that interesting by itself because they were supposed to be already, I mean, doing worse than the mock group. So they're just doing even worse. So it's not exactly the most unpredictable thing, I mean, if but just but what's interesting is how though how even this guy that tried to woo her, he kept telling her, oh, how could you be going out with a vegetable seller, etc. Well, what is interesting is how the statuses are slowly changing now. So this guy is going downwards in his own mind, presumably as well, mainly, and the vegetable seller is even considering his humble origins, succeeding at least now. Winning competitions as such. He has constant challenges. It's honestly remarkable how he does these. I mean, yes, I personally just give up at the first hurdle, but then again, I have no desire to sell vegetables, so there we go. But yeah, it's I don't know how anyone could. But no, I mean, just what's weird is that he seemed to like selling vegetables. He seems to like that without even eating it much. Like I didn't get the impression he had when this other guy told him that he he mainly eats vegetables, as if somehow he doesn't eat them. How could you sell something if you don't eat it? I mean, he does eat it. He's seen eating it at that party. That was such a weird party, by the way. Um, I've never seen people eating salads with an electronic beat in the background. I mean, a party, I guess you could do it individually, but uh, I've never seen a salad party, to be fair, generally, no matter what music, but yeah. An electronic beat in the background made it strange. Anyway, yeah. So it's it's an intriguing story, I suppose. It's not intriguing, but um, you know, the other um, the other South Korean series I last watched. I think it was my first as well. Was Introverted Boss, yes, as I've also commented. And see, the romance there in comparison is stranger, shall we say? Yeah, not that there's still hurdles here. There's hurdles everywhere, but that was stranger. I mean, obviously, since he had issues with social interaction and such. Um, they were opposite personalities as well. These are more similar in this sense. So they are different romances, I suppose. Yeah. Um, Now, Introverted Boss was supposed to be a comedy as well. And it did have comedic scenes, just different type of comedies. So, hmm. Anyway, it's I don't know how useful it is to compare. Anyway, it's the wrong thing really. But they both involved corporations and such. So I mean, there are similarities. There's just slight differences. But while they met their colleagues in Introverted Boss, they met them just they were just there. So it's not a great beginning or such. It's just they were just there. They were just colleagues by default. So the audience there learns to uh, get accustomed to them after a while, but otherwise they're there. In this one, though, in Bachelor's vegetable store, how he met his colleagues was pretty cool, I think. Just after a drunken night, and they're all drunk and they tell their stories together. Um, Now, I don't know why, but that reminded me just a bit, of Paranoia Agent. Not quite in the same sense or the same direction, but there were also similar sort of things where people meet, tell the story, sort of a meeting of the minds and such. And but in Paranoid Agent, they had slightly different motive. More about, I think there was one about suicide and such. So that's not the topic here. So yeah. Um, but yeah, great beginning, and then they continued on helping him now and such, and it's interesting how it's developing. It took me a while to place where so-called Tosa was, who he was, that is, and until I firmly had in my mind what the relations were like, with the sister of Wu and such, and how Tosa also manages the vegetable market, and what the Wok Corporation does in relation to the vegetable markets and such. So it's all related apparently, but took me just a bit, and we're only just starting to get into the what Mock does essentially. So it's not quite very. So I'm assuming he uses it as a springboard as such now. But yeah, otherwise it is an interesting sort of drama, I suppose. It's not. No, it is melodramatic, but it's not interesting. I suppose, yeah. Um, hmm. So, in terms of, from episode 12 to 19 or so, yeah. So, just after I mean, I didn't comment exactly on absolutely everything. I did, just before, from 1 to 11, you know, um, it's obviously all just one story. But yeah, I think so. This one concentrated more on um her story mainly. I think Mokka on story, and obviously, their strange relationship which ended very abruptly and such, and um so in terms of that, uh they kind of depicted it well, I suppose, sort of what a breakup would be like, except, I mean, I don't know how many people end up in hospital, honestly. Um, uh, the makeup though was a bit overdone, I think. When he was on the bridge waiting for her, and he says he sees him pain. The makeup is too overdone, I think. Like, they just smeared a bunch of ugly looking things, I guess. I don't know what they are, what kind of makeup it is, but it was quite a lot. They just smeared all over. Anyway, I mean, it wasn't too bad ultimately. One thing that I noticed, I haven't absolutely verified, but I think is the way they use makeup. Now that was overdone, but they, I think, used makeup as well to change the color of the lips for some reason, and to make the pressed people look silent and such. I'm not entirely sure if that happens in real life. Honestly, I don't think it does. I mean, I don't think lips would change color so easily. Um, but when I noticed that in this series, I thought that made sense. Like when Huang was facing the prospect of jail, her, well, I mean, she herself was quite, she had these physical effects as well, and her son had as well in terms of this, with regards to, uh, uh, the, so they made sense. Everything that happened made sense. But of course, I mean, there's a lot of subplots in this series, and I like it for that. But some are weaker than others, and such and such. Like ultimately, no one will really, I think, really relate to that so-called idol story. I mean, up to episode 19. I mean, some things did happen then, and some things were revealed, but I'm not entirely sure what they were honestly. And I mean, this might sound like a spoiler, but it's not really. It makes sense really when you see them arguing with each other and such. But and in terms of the pregnancy, but actually at first I thought it was a fake pregnancy because she apparently planted herself in the audience to make others think more highly of their business. That's what basically happened, and I'm assuming it happens in real life as well. Not that, it's too bad. Just they just she just agreed to ask this convenient question and such, kind of like I suppose you know. Anyway, so because of that, I thought that maybe the baby was also fake, considering she was there as a friend, but obviously didn't tell the other the rest of the audience that she was related to them. But no, apparently, supposedly the baby is real, and yeah, and that sounds very clear. I mean, they obviously revealed who the baby was. Um, um, who the father was, but earlier on, what they didn't address is this thing about I mean, it's so confusing. I'm not very experienced with Korean lingo, and this is pretty much the first series that I'm really learning what Nuna meant, even though it seems to be something very basic. But I'm not sure if they said it in introverted boss, but I didn't notice it, despite having watched the entire series as well already. And they have this thing about, and it seems like Chinese series do this as well. I'm not sure if the people themselves do. And it's very confusing, like when someone say, oh, yeah, I guess they do it in English as well. Someone says bro or such, when they're not really their brother. So I'm not sure that this is what happened. I mean, my understanding is that they were siblings. So unless they're just not addressing the elephant in the room, I don't know. Either that or it's some sort of saying and they're not really sibling, but they didn't really specify at all. At any rate, I mean, he really doesn't have much of a backstory, and he's gone to Japan now, so it's really irrelevant, I think. Whereas the others seem to all have some sort of like even the so-called farmer, the guy with the he has a he's developing quite a story now, with this new girlfriend and her own backstory. So that's quite involved there. Obviously not quite as much as Han Taeyang, right? If I pronounce it correctly. I'm not sure why, but I find Korean names to be difficult to pronounce. I mean, they aren't too long either, but they tend to, unlike Japanese has these what do you call them? These sharp edges. Korean is more like French, maybe. I don't know. Just this thing where they're not very, like young is pronounced like young in English and such, but it's spelled a with an A instead. So it's a bit confusing. Obviously, you get used to it. Ultimately, what's confusing is that they seem to say something after the name. Usually, I think something that sounds like she or such, and I'm not entirely sure what it is. I'm assuming it's some sort of suffix, like Japanese has as well. But I'm not clear at all about that. This series hasn't explained so far, although it has explained the other modes of addresses. Mm. And yeah, so the other guy as well that hasn't talked is developing a bit of backstory with regards to his past and his supposed mythology and the fact that he began to talk after a while, despite not beginning to talk at all at the beginning. Yeah, and and yeah, and the other guy was just simply the nerdy guy was simply scolded by his mother and then he left. So they all have this sort of backstory. Apart from maybe him, maybe he didn't do much else besides that. He just disappeared a bit and then came back. And the so-called idol, he's not really done much, apart from being in the store like the others. Other than that, though, yeah, the farmer though has I think the most of a backstory. So well, not so much a backstory. I mean, we don't really know much about his actual past so far, but they're developing a current story as opposed to the others, which aren't. And obviously, the other guy, the son of Huang, obviously has much more of a backstory. He's listed as a third in the credits list, so obviously, even though he is kind of a pathetic character, and I keep going back and forth to because obviously at the beginning he didn't quite, he really didn't like her, but it seems like he really did begin to like her, and it's not just honestly pitiful creature because he wants her to go play I think it was baseball with him. He was laughing and She barely was. In fact, she was about to cry over her previous failed relationship. And yeah. And in the meantime, at the same time, he still has a relationship with his ex, but not really in any passionate sense. It's more of a very much platonic relationship now, kind of like a wizened fruit or something. It's not a better of a relationship. More of a friendship, though, I suppose. Um, yeah. So he really is pitiful. So obviously he was most pitiful when he got on his knees and such, and then he uh, ate more of his humility by working on the vegetable stomach. This being in the eyes of others, of course, some people, certain people, you know. Of course, what the series did, I think, I mean, what I seem to feel is that, I mean, I never thought that I would feel like a vegetable sauce is almost exciting to it. I mean, it's not really. I mean, I'm not going to go there after, kind of like how the Harvest Moon franchise didn't quite. I mean, it makes farming sound really fun, but in reality, I mean, unless someone doesn't just read what farming is really about, um, reality is far from that. Reality isn't really fun at all. But Harvest Moon as a franchise is fun. Maybe not quite. The first game is very repetitive and monotonous, but anyway, yeah. But the point is, they make a vegetable store seem like a very pleasant place. What's really, of course, interesting and pleasant and such, and is simply the camaraderie, of course, which is what really is about. Of course, many things happen. I mean, it is essentially a melodrama. And even if you had a story in life, you wouldn't want people to come and accuse you of doing things that you haven't done, and then you end up with legal repercussions, etc. And it's all because of someone who hates you and wants revenge. I mean, I don't know if that honestly happens in real life, the chance of that happening, but it could still happen in the sense that someone accuses you. So, and obviously with food, it's much more, I suppose, yeah, if it's technology, then it can be sent back and inspected and such. So, yeah, I'm not sure how they do it. I'm honestly wondering. Besides that, that's primarily why I would never really, really want to do that in real life or anything. But, I mean, I don't know, when I thought of a vegetable store before, I don't know why I thought that it might be sort of a solitary thing. I think farming is solitary, but I'm not sure about. Obviously, a vegetable store can have multiple people as well in it, like any other store. This one in particular, I mean, many stores aren't though even half as fun as this, are they? Like, I don't know. They make it seem fun, and in a way, you can sort of see what he meant when he said that he wants to brighten people's days. Now, I guess you could be a robot and sell vegetables, or yeah, you could somehow try to brighten people's days by smiling and whatnot. I mean, personally, I wouldn't do the person, but it's sort of brightened this series as well these days. And obviously, then they have a lot of deals and whatnot, and they think of these things like squeezing pears, and that's another thing as well that I learned. I had never seen those pears before. I mean, I'm more familiar with the hourglass kind of pear. And yeah, I researched it, and apparently, yeah, it grows almost exclusively in Asia. It's quite a huge kind of pear. I'm curious whether it has the same taste and everything. Says it has more water apparently, although the pears I know already have a lot of water. So that's another thing I guess that I learned. Never knew before. It's not quite what you learn from Harvest Moon. I mean, at least the ones I played didn't quite go into detail about vegetables and fruits and such. Here, on the other hand, yeah, there were some other things I haven't verified, like with the watermelon and its tail, something about freshness, although yeah, I kind of forgotten now. But it's all interesting, actually. and he actually said that while he was doing this Snow White thing. That was quite something. Snow White dubstep or whatever that music was. Yeah. No, unique. Yeah, I guess if you want to sell something, you do that to stand out. Yeah, especially if you have what looks like aesthetically subpar fruits. Uh, so I'm honestly curious and would be interested to find out if that actually happened in real life. I mean, I'm assuming something similar might have happened, but if that happened specifically, if this person, I mean, how similar this person is to the real life one. I read somewhere really that the the book this is based on isn't quite as melodramatic, possibly, and I wouldn't be surprised. I suppose a lot of stuff is happening, that makes it seem almost unrealistic. It's one of those series, where people seem to be at just the right corner to overhear stuff and such, and just this happens and that happens, a lot of coincidences. So anyway, it's unbelievable, but it works as a drama. I don't know why. I mean, with all that, it would seem artificial, but it sort of works. Like I was honestly excited when he was going to Makaon's office, and there was her supposed mother. It's that's I don't know why, but it was sort of exciting. What happened then didn't quite, match the excitement. I don't know, just it was still sort of subdued. Obviously, that was what began then his thinking processes into what happened and such. Um, I don't know personally why he didn't think of this before. Like, where else could Jin Shim could have gone? It's but the most amazing story was when the her supposed father was looking and searching and investigating, and then there was the absolutely beautiful scene in the 19th episode where he just dropped on his knees near the ocean. I mean, that was something. That was almost spiritual, and he just cried there. And it really works. I mean, before he was all smiley and such, almost too much, right? I was thinking at one point, um, this is a CEO. Most CEOs smile and are so kind all the time, and in all likelihood, it is obviously an exaggeration. Most aren't, but in this case, it sort of worked because you get that at the beginning, and then you get a counter thesis to the series, sort of like beginning, middle, and end. And this was the end where he began his investigation and ended with his discovery. And then the smiles left. He became stern, but he was still not violent, and that is, if only everyone was like that. Obviously, it would be very terrible if he was violent, particularly towards someone pregnant. Um, but yeah, with regards to hair, the so-called ajuma, that's another form of address that I've learned. Ajuma, I've never heard of it before, but there we go. Yeah, she is quite the Machiavellian personified. And even up to the baby, the fact that she had that baby, that is just totally that she knew that would happen, everything would be unraveled, and she had a baby, so she'd have a leverage over him. Uh, she really, I mean, as much as one would want to almost loathe her, she really uh, puts the thriller in this. I mean, this is very much a thriller, I mean, no one thinks that something about a vegetable store would end up being a thriller. But sure enough, true to this Mung Jong name or whatever it is, it's quite melodramatic. But in addition to that, besides that, it's also pretty much a thriller. At least after the 10th episode or so, it's when especially the most thrilling part is when after he got that photo. That's quite something. And I was thinking about it. I thought, um, just at first, I don't know, I didn't quite figure it out, but obviously he thought wrongly about who Mokkagon was because he knew that it was Hedot. And then now I thought maybe he didn't recognize her or such, or maybe he didn't recognize both of them. But no, apparently he did recognize. That's the thing. Then I don't know what kind of assumptions I need to make. Like she was Jin Shim at that point, from a decade ago. Now, as she grew up, she wasn't even recognizable to Han Taeyang. So am I to assume then that her supposed father recognizes her? I mean, obviously there's likely going to be pictures and such, but as the audience, we aren't shown that. In fact, when a picture is shown, when Han Taeyang is in their house, it's from when she was an adult. So they could have very easily shown us one with her as a child, and that would make the connection very seamlessly. But they didn't. So a bit of a leap there. But otherwise, everything that happened was quite interesting. How all the dominoes were falling and such. Honestly, uh, I'm not usually this excited about thriller, but I don't know whether maybe because it wasn't labeled as a thriller, and so I didn't have many expectations in the first place. But it turned out to be quite thrilling, as I said, and the thrill, of course, ended now in the 19th episode. Kind of. I'm sure something else will happen, and Machiavelli will always reappear and such, just as it is doing just now with regards to that customer. But with regards to the most highlighted aspect of the story, that began from the second episode, that finished in the 19th episode, and it was amazing. Like, everything that ever happened in Introverted Boss. I'm only comparing it because it's also Korean, but I mean, I could compare it to any other series, I suppose. Um, but everything that happened in Introverted Boss doesn't really hold a candle. I mean, it was more of an investigative sort of mystery, to be fair. It wasn't more of a thriller, but I don't know. I mean, obviously, all these dramas do have indeed drama. So that's to be expected within the title. So they're all dramas, and they all have these sort of moments where characters are talking and establishing their relationships and such. But this is the thing. This had this story which continued on up until the 19th episode at the very least, and it was very focused in a way. And the so-called Juma was really trying her best to. She did absolutely everything in order to avoid being found out. Yeah. It was quite something to see. Like even when that thing happened, when she invited. Some stranger to assume the role of Jujun Shim, that was quite something. And then he went there. I knew that would happen when as soon as he said, yeah, let's go out for something to eat. He is quite clever on his own, yeah. Um, and it was quite funny though, yeah. It's everything that happened, and then Hunter Young told her that he was going to keep her secret, but suppose that doesn't mean that he didn't even know that they were coming. So it's not like he was pre sort of determined to do something specific, and he simply didn't react. I mean, no one can blame him. I'm sure she does though, which is why she reacted like this. So yeah, as one can see, it's very very convoluted story, and I do like it. Just because it has this focus mainly. I mean, in comparison to there were many others that were like Dying Guy, which is Japanese, is also. So I also commented on this, and it's been many months now, but and yeah, by the way, the actor there, I don't know what happened. I just realized that the actor just committed suicide recently, and it's a very beautiful thing. So I happened to watch Dying Guy a few months before he died, and it's very sad. I don't know. Yeah, so Dying Guy was sort of a thriller as well, but It was more of an investigative mystery as well, I think. More of a live one, though, as opposed to, investigating the past like Introverted Boss did. But I mean, Introverted Boss was much more of a romance than anything, and comedy. But the mystery was really in the background. This, on the other hand, in this vegetable store series, which is quite bizarre. I don't know why they even called it that, conserving. It's not even. I mean, it is there, but it's not quite the focus. I mean, obviously the thriller element overrides it, honestly. And that's what it is, isn't it? The What happens with the story is quite overwhelming. It overwhelms everything else, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. But if you're going to name it for a store, then I don't know, just it's sort of like naming it, for the lesser aspect. I mean, at least with regards to Introverted Boss, they did at least name it after one of the protagonists, as opposed to naming it after a store that isn't really the central element of the story. But anyway, yeah. But I did like it. It was quite a journey. I haven't finished it yet. 5 episodes left. But otherwise, it's quite interesting. The music as well. I should mention the music definitely. I love the music. I mean, at first I thought the music didn't quite match the stories, and the story wasn't as good as the music. But over time, I thought it was. It ended up, sort of growing into it in a way. Whenever the mystery is unraveling, they have this, that mysterious music, and I really liked it. Yeah, and when when it's really very well suited to the when it's romantic scenes, it's romantic music and such. Um, yeah, there was. I mean, it's very difficult to empathize with the CEO's wife, right? Obviously, for everything she ever did, it's very difficult. There was only one moment though when I really did. Like, it's surely the most powerful moment. I think one of the most powerful. I think in the entire series. I think I already mentioned it actually earlier, but I mean it did happen. I think in the first 11 episodes, but it's still very powerful. And this was long before her husband found out. So yeah, when they were in the theater and she was crying and she was holding her hand out, whatever she did and does in the future, one cannot help but feel pitiful for that. Just it honestly was powerful. Just holding her hand out like that, knowing that of course, and then it's quite jarring seeing her husband just smile, but he doesn't know, so no one can blame him. But it's quite something, yeah. Knowing it sort of highlights the differences in perception. Perception is something I'm quite interested in, and it's based on what people know and on their memories. People react differently to different things. So sure enough, just like that incident in the playground where that girl was on top of something, she reacted quite. I mean, if she fell, she probably would have maybe broke her leg or so, but probably not. Worse than that. But obviously, that's not what she thought. She went in the hospital because that's what happened in the past. I'm not sure she knew exactly where she fell from, but she might have calculated as such. Um, but yeah, uh, but this is the thing. It is quite still difficult to empathize with her because even at the same even when that happened in the second episode, yeah, what was her mother doing? I mean, she did blame herself, so I'm not, and she then nearly tried to join her. So but what was she doing then? She was um, just trying to be superior over Jin, and that's pathetic, So I mean, you know, you're just not allowed to even empathize with her at all from the very beginning. And then obviously she did even worse just before the second episode ended. uh, and the whole thing, is just and then when she took Jin Shin with her, it's a mixed bag. Yeah, I'm not, it's not so entirely negative or such. I mean, they did sort of save each other in a way, like she said herself. So it's not like she kidnapped her, and she and she did ask her honestly, and at the end, in the I think 19th episode, she does tell her supposed father that she implied that it was her idea actually, the way she said it, it was as if she suggested it to her. So she changed the versions a bit, but I noticed what she did, and because I remember that it was his wife that really begged her at the beginning to do so, and she hesitated in fact, so not quite the other way around. But so in a way, though, I can see that she kind of felt like she did benefit from this somewhat, even besides, I mean, the wealth and such. She did, she didn't have parents and such, so she sort of, but it was still very, very neurotic relationship, obviously, especially with her, uh, with her supposed father. I mean, at one point I thought, wow, he must be an ideal sort of father figure, really. I mean, that's seriously like, I mean, obviously, stereotypically, most CEOs would be brusque and aggressive. Stereotypically, obviously, everyone differs. But yeah, in this series, he really is the the epitome of kindness, almost, which is absurd to think of from a CEO. Um, Obviously, towards his family, so that's the difference. So I'm not sure if he was towards absolutely everyone. They don't quite show him, but well, they did show him, having mercy in inverted commas on Han Tae-young when they were late, and allowing them with the penalty and such. So you could call it that mercy, but he allowed them anyway, whereas the receptionists or whoever they were didn't. So that's something. Other than that, though, I guess yeah, you could say that they were his family. So most rational people would react like that to their family, ideally at least, and but I mean, he really did seem ideal. In comparison, his wife was anything but ideal. I mean, she manipulated her, and yet she did still say that she felt loved by her. That's probably because she never knew any other love, really. She was supposed to be an orphan, so apart from the grandmother, of course. But that's the thing, right? And she doesn't know what her own mother did to her. And that's something I'm hoping is also revealed just before the end. Otherwise, it's a bit of a loose knot. Uh, so, but yeah, otherwise, it's it's quite an interesting story. Uh, in comparison, though, I mean, other series that were sort of thrilling as well, include something like from Western production now, Bates Motel, right? That I happen to watch. Um, in comparison, so it's not as focused. There's a lot of branches here and there, sub stories, but there's never one predominant story, unlike there is here. It does not the end, sort of coalesce, but not quite, And obviously, there's a lot of murder, which is to be expected, but um, well, yeah, I mean, in this series, there is murder, but not quite the same extent. Yeah, there just isn't. There was a lot of murder in Bates Motel. I mean, then again, there is an entire second franchise, so that's the only thing really. It's part of the thing anyway. So I don't know. Kind of. The most interesting thing is there's a psychology behind it mainly. But there is also that in this as well. The psychology behind people who want to hide themselves for a long time, forever. To what extent they go and how someone clings on to someone else, and how people don't recognize each other after just a decade, apparently. how people respond to their names as well. Like at one point, I think in the 18th episode, he just called her out instead of calling her Mokaon, which he had until a few episodes earlier. He simply called her real name out, and she responded. That was a bit of a bizarre thing, to be fair, because at one point I thought it might be a flashback of some sort. Because as far as I know, they broke up and such. So I don't know. Apparently, she went along with it. He went along with it, and that happened. What was really odd though was the taking of pictures as if somehow they're still on the honeymoon or something. And then of course after that they went back pretty much to what they were like before, not really talking such. So I'm not sure, a bit out of place, but otherwise still. I mean, as a story, it's really um. I mean, it still doesn't rise though to I don't know, like still doesn't have something transcendental. Like sometimes I really look for something transcendental in some movies or such, kind of like just something like a principle, or something something abstract. This isn't abstract, but it's still very interesting, even if it's not. It deals with human relationships, which aren't abstract usually, but it's still very interesting, of course. But as opposed to um, well, I mean, films like V for Vendetta, I guess, are not very comparable, but there is an abstract sort of principle to it behind it, just like V says at one point, the ideas live on and such. Now I'm not sure what the idea is here, so as opposed to, I mean, maybe it could be a commentary on possibly um how people remember and such. But otherwise, there isn't quite this central sort of notion that the whole series revolves around. Yeah, unlike just I don't know, just um, I mean, in comparison, right? I'm not directly comparing here. Very comparable series anymore. It's not even a live action series like this one, but I mean, in comparison, right? A series I like a lot is Mushishi, right? Which is an anime series, and it's it's not at all focused actually. So it is the opposite in a way. It is. I mean, most series have these sort of subplots and such, and then they do have maybe a central story. Uh, a lot of series do. Um, I mean, there are a few series that have more of a central plot, and there are a few series that have more of a subplot thing, episodic thing almost even, and Mushishi falls in the latter. Uh, and they're not necessarily, I mean, worse or better, they can be whatever they like, but then, there's this thing, Mushishi has something really transcendental, even though it's episodic. There's something like a notion that it follows each time, even though they're all different stories, all about different people and such. But there's something that somehow, I mean, I guess in this series, the thing would be, I don't know, maybe vegetables that they all share somehow, but it's not quite a notion, is it? Obviously, it's more of an object. Otherwise, really, I don't know. There isn't much else. It doesn't focus on romance exclusively, and it doesn't permeate throughout. So you cannot say that maybe love is, I don't know, kind of like maybe it is more an introverted boss, etc. But otherwise, I mean, it's still very thrilling. I mean, it's certainly more thrilling than, I don't know, Internal Affairs was. I mean, that was just violent, and that's pretty much it mostly. Not very, very. I mean, it did have a story, but it was more violent uh, than more of a plot. More violence than plot, shall we say? And I don't really like those sort of things much. Really. I mean, there is violence in this, but not to the extent. People talk more, obviously. Obviously, there is this stereotype that Western things are more violent than not, but I don't know. This sort of follows, I guess, that it's not. I mean, obviously, it's not. It's just purely a stereotype. It's not really doesn't quite function. I mean, I've seen many violent Eastern movies as well and such. Not serious so far, though. Somehow. But yeah. Otherwise, yeah. I'll watch the last 5 episodes and conclude my review. It was quite a ride so far, as one can see, and I did have a bit of difficulty though finding high definition uh, streams. But yeah, there really isn't really. Otherwise, I mean, even if people wanted to buy it or something, there's nothing on Amazon. There's nothing on any of the actual streaming sites. Yeah, so yeah. But yeah, anyway, with regards to the series itself, it's quite something. I don't think, honestly. I mean, it is in a way misleading. Kind of like I said, the first 2 episodes were, because I thought it was going to be mainly comedy. And it wasn't for the last first 2 episodes at least. It wasn't, and then there was more comedy later on, but the thrilling aspect also began. The romance aspect also began as well. So it's just a mixture, really. But I think it's a good ratio. It's a good mixture. So I'm not complaining about it, really. So far so good, yeah. I'm assuming it will have a good ending, considering so far. And it's it's an 8-year-old series at this point, huh? It's kind of old, but so yeah, it's interesting and funny and thrilling so far. It really was up to now. And yeah, I finished it, and um, it's not as usual. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. It was very melodramatic, though obviously very. But within the melodrama, there was sense. I mean, the story made sense, and it was also vivacious. So I mean, it's not just the melodrama. It's not just the depressing stuff. Um, but yeah, also had some comedy. Um, so I mean, at the end, though, I mean, obviously they thought, I guess they don't need necessarily to be bothered with saying exactly how they got the show back. But I suppose it's a trivial detail in comparison. Ultimately, that thing didn't happen that I hoped would happen until the very end with regards to his granny. I was still hoping it would happen, but after everything that happened, I suppose, um, yeah, with regards to her, I mean, just obviously she's very key to the entire story. But just like the other one said, Don B's mother, that no matter what she did, I guess, yeah, and um what Jun Shim said herself. I mean, she was detestable, but then she really lost it, and that's it. That's its own thing, I guess. But I honestly don't know how anyone can lie so much, almost instinctively. Oh yeah, nah. When this was made, 2012, there wasn't quite a glaring example. But anyway, y- she still really did up until the very end. So you could sort of see why her husband, didn't trust her anymore and such. But then, what he imposed on his daughter with regards to, who she can love. That's that's kind of similar to what she did. So yeah, he should really have learned from that. But then again, I don't know. Just that's the funny thing. So he couldn't trust her, and yet he trusted her story of what he did, and he trusted her emotions about um Tan Han Taeyang. I mean, yeah. I'm not even sure the story was clarified there. It was kind of hazy, it seemed. His daughter only said, that he simply didn't want them to meet, and that's it. Yeah, it's not like he pushed her or anything. Of course, after the 19th episode, when I last commented, the thrilling aspect is sort of gone then because he already knew he really just pretty much you know at that point then things are just settled, so things are just settling again and more, but other than that, yeah, it was still so interesting, but of course it wasn't, I mean, that terribly interesting, like um the Ajuma, going after him again, for some reason, for some unknown reason, just because, it didn't have much more reason. I mean, at least before she had the excuse of trying to stop him, but now she really didn't, since it was all out again. And it's a kind of annoying thought that his sister didn't get her revenge on her, because I mean, just after she did that to her, she didn't even tell anyone, really. It's a bit of a, kind of, slightly less grievous than the Granny thing, but it's still unfair that, the series ended without it being ever even mentioned to others, similar to Granny's situation. Because with regards to that, I don't know who could mention it, since, but I was hoping maybe, when she was in this delirious state, maybe she'd say it, and then it would be circulated or something. Because it's too grave to just leave in the shadows. I'm not sure if the script writers honestly just forgot it at this point. I mean, obviously the ending was still pretty interesting. The way they did everything, like that's quite something to propose. But and I mean, yeah, everything else was pretty cool as well. I mean, obviously they did do it a bit over the top there with a baby being born. Considering everything that already happened. Although also symbolic, considering the miscarriage and such. So, uh, e- and then yeah, just before the proposal, there was that scene of the seagulls in the sea. So overall, it ended quite well. Um, but no, no, I don't think there's a but. It's just there's still an undercurrent of darkness, I suppose. It still tried to paint, I mean, a facade of happiness, I suppose, but there's still an undercurrent of, and obviously, like every most other series, yeah. I mean, I suppose it could be every, but maybe not. I don't know. But many other series, at least, do have these sort of flashback moments, especially at the end, and that's literally what happened. It was very sort of procedural, every time she picked up a vegetable, there was a flashback and such. Uh, but otherwise, I mean, it still sort of works as it is. Still interesting. Um, I cannot say that the ending was necessarily you know. To be fair, I don't usually have a problem with endings, but this ending was pretty cool as well. Suppose not too similar to someone dancing in the rain, like an ending before, but um, well, so it wasn't, I mean, comedic in the sense. This wasn't very comedic as a series. I mean, it was more depressing than comedic. I got to admit, but it still had some good comedy. When Like, it did have good comedy. No, it concerns, her family or such, generally not. But there were some moments when it was a bit over the top, though. Like for example, when he's trying to buy vegetables, and this, um, how could they complain so much about checking them? I don't get it. Like, it should be a given. Why do they expect people to buy their vegetables if they don't even see them? It's like it's the most bizarre thing ever. I don't know. I'm not sure if maybe they really don't like that to be done in South Korea, or it was just done for the over the top effect for such a drama. But in real life, I'm assuming it's just illogical for anyone to expect to sell stuff without the buyer seeing them for anything, really. Um, but somehow that happened, yeah. And there was an episode when they were just getting punched and sprayed with water, and most over the top. I mean, I'm assuming, yeah, they did that just to for comedic sake, for comedy's sake. It is, but um, it was still very over the top. So in my opinion, it's not laugh out loud comedy either. It was just over the top comedy, but it wasn't even realistic. So I'm not exactly sure. Um, but yeah, otherwise there was more comedy, I think, in the mid parts rather than at the beginning or end. That's kind of to be expected, I guess, for such a tale. Interesting how the Torsa's character changed throughout the series. He began being really brusque and sort of a brute, and then he even tried to cook at the end, despite kind of failing. But yeah, um, for understandable circumstances, of I suppose, yeah. Um, there were two people who only had a one-sided love affair. Kind of depressing, I guess, especially when it comes to Tambi, I suppose, because the other guy there, I don't know, he was quite ruthless, and the fact that they became friends with him after, or at least, Han became friends with him again, um, was a bit, I don't know, I didn't think, I personally wouldn't befriend him so quickly just because he went to tell the chairman what he did. I mean, he still did it in the end, so. But then I don't know, he was in a precarious situation himself, so I guess he needed help or such. So yeah, but in terms of the fact that he didn't have anything reciprocated, doesn't quite. Also, his mom didn't quite appear in the last few episodes. Not sure why, because most other people appeared, just not his mom. Huang. Yeah. But yeah. Otherwise, it was sort of interesting. I suppose everything was. You should read about how realistic it was, how much they adapted from real life. Assuming there's a lot of fiction, but I have no idea how much. Also, I checked for any real life information about this guy who really established. Obviously, it's very difficult now to find anything due to this drama, since everything that comes up is about it. And apparently, the real vegetable shop is called that, so even more difficult, I suppose. Um, there's very little information. There is one article that I could find from 2003, which is when the book came out, um, and apparently he began selling seafood instead, which wasn't depicted at all in the drama, which is fine, I suppose. Since I don't know, I prefer vegetables. Yeah, and otherwise, still did go somewhat similar to how they depict it, apparently. He had some people helping him as well and such, and but nothing about fiancés or angry mother-in-laws to be or anything. So really, I cannot verify any of that melodrama, any at all, none at all, which is annoying. I'm thinking constantly whether this really happened or this or that. No, that there's really very little information to find about this guy apparently. The problem is that there's other people as well with the same name. Apparently, there's a lot of people with the same name. So yeah, it's a problem. Apparently, there's an actor as well. Mm, besides others, um, what I also found is a more recent article from a couple of years ago. So many years after the drama, where he apparently just one line really, a sentence where he apparently, from what I could understood, what I can understand, he apparently, I think, chastise these big corporations that are abusive. Apparently, that the current government has someone appointed for to check for in the Fair Trade Commission or something, and due to that, he removed the website or something. I'm not entirely sure, unless I'm misunderstanding, and he's abusing himself or something. I really don't know. There was only just this one sentence, so can't say much, unless there's more information in the native Korean language, which would be much more difficult to research. I really cannot know much more, though. It's very difficult. Obviously, whenever one research this, starting from the drama, don't just has one sentence as well. Usually, it's based on a supposed true story. It doesn't even say supposed, and yet doesn't say much more other than supposedly based on this and franchise, which there's nothing else besides that, which is disappointing. Really, I was hoping that it would be something. I suppose, I guess, at least, but there isn't. Well, yeah. Otherwise, though, anyway, as a drama, it's interesting. Um, but I mean, it only really works at the moment, I suppose. I don't know. It's not one of those that. It's kind of like, I guess, Planet, yeah, or something like, yeah, in books or something. There's these sort of, just a lot of melodrama, which makes you feel at that exact moment, but then it's just like, what was that about? Was there anything? Was there anything that transcends time, and so you can sort of feel later, like Mushishi that I mentioned earlier, for example, that I can still sort of feel years later. I mean, will I feel this years later? I don't know, probably not too much. I mean, it's one of those things. Um, but otherwise, um, I did like it. I'm not saying I didn't. I just wish it had less screaming and shouts. But otherwise, I suppose, yeah, it's I mean, some sites even call it a soap apparently, and how soaps turn out. I don't normally watch soaps. I mean, not the ones that have hundreds of episodes. I'd rather watch nothing than them, or reality TV or something, which apparently one of the characters from this drama participates in, Running Man or something. I read. Yeah. Otherwise, um, it's it wasn't too bad. I like the romantic aspect. A lot of shouting, but otherwise, I liked how it ended. As I say, and the thriller aspect of it up to episode 19 at least was also very interesting. Yeah, but beyond that, I mean, it just sort of ran out a bit. But otherwise, still interesting. Um, and they could have made a bit more comedy though. Comedy was a slight bit lacking considering everything else. There was, I think, even more of the romantic elements than there was comedy, which is sort of disappointing. But no, the romance wasn't disappointing. It was fine. I mean, it wasn't a straightforward romantic relationship. It had many bumps, so sort of realistic in that sense. Just like the thrilling aspects of it. Not that it was overly realistic, but it was thrilling at very least, and it works even just as fiction. Sure, there were a lot of coincidences, people just around the corner finding each other, etc. But somehow it still was thrilling in that sense. I don't know, it sort of still worked. Like, so I liked it for that and for other reasons as well. Why not? I suppose. Yeah.